He was starving, limping, and ready to kill, until one familiar scent stopped him cold. In the heart of a wild forest, a red fox came face to face with a wounded bobcat kitten. What should have been a brutal end became the beginning of something no one could have predicted. This is a story of instinct defied, of loyalty born in silence, and of a journey that rewrote the rules of the wild. Stay with us until the end, because what happens between predator and prey will move your heart in ways you never imagined. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy the story, please like and follow. It helps us keep creating more. Your feedback means everything. Thank you. Autumn whispered through the great Smoky Mountains, scattering golden leaves like fading memories. Beneath the rustling canopy, a red fox moved with quiet purpose. His name was Alder, and the fading sunlight caught the streak of white along his chest, the color of early frost. A scar curled across his right forepaw, a permanent reminder of the steel trap that nearly ended him 4 winters ago. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The wind carried a bitter chill as Alder crept beneath twisted laurel branches. Hunger was sharp, louder than the wind. His lean body moved in silence, nose twitching with purpose. Then, he froze. Blood. Not just the iron tang of a fallen squirrel or a rabbit caught in panic. This was raw, fresh, mixed with something deeper. Fear. Alder's ears pricked forward. Something alive. Something injured. He followed it. Beyond a thicket of thorn and fern, Alder found the source. A bobcat kitten, small and trembling, huddled under a low bush. Her tawny fur was matted with blood from a long gash on her hind leg. She was trying to hide, but her wide blue eyes betrayed her terror. Alder stepped forward, silently. His body was taut, like a drawn bow. Prey. She didn't belong here, not this deep into the forest, not alone. Alder's jaws ached, his instincts screaming for release. One swift movement, and the pain in his belly would fade. But then, the wind shifted. A scent. Faint, almost lost beneath the blood and pine, but unmistakable. Pipe tobacco. Pine sap. Antiseptic. His muscles locked, her collar, a black strap around her neck, with a blinking silver device clipped beneath her chin. Alder crept closer, his nose brushing it. His breath hitched. Eliana, the human. The woman with silver-streaked hair, soft voice, and steady hands. The one who had knelt beside him in the snow, months after his paw had nearly been severed. She had freed him, cleaned his wound, and waited weeks before releasing him again into the wild. She hadn't tried to tame him, just helped him. And now her scent was on this tiny creature, woven into the threads of her collar like a promise. This was no ordinary kitten. This one mattered to her. Alder stepped back. The hunger remained, gnawing and wild, but something heavier rose beneath it. A memory, a question. What would Eliana do? The bobcat kitten let out a thin, rasping hiss. Her claws, small and undeveloped, splayed in warning. Alder didn't flinch. He sat, curling his tail around his feet, ears forward. He waited. The kitten trembled, then sagged, her eyes blinking slowly, exhaustion overtaking fear. Alder rose. He moved to her side, sniffed her wound carefully. A sharp object had torn her flesh, maybe a branch, maybe another animal's claws. Either way, she wouldn't survive the night alone. And he could not walk away. Not this time. Gently, the fox opened his jaws and took the kitten's scruff between his teeth. Her body tensed, then went limp. Not in surrender, just empty of resistance. He adjusted her weight carefully and began walking. He didn't know if he'd reach the station. He didn't know if Eliana still lived there, or if she'd even remember him. But he remembered her. And this little one, Solstice, he would later call her, smelled like redemption. They walked through dusk until the shadows swallowed the world. When Alder found the hollow trunk of an old pine, he slipped inside. He laid the kitten down gently and curled around her, shielding her tiny body from the cold. She gave a weak mew, and then, finally, slept. Outside, the forest howled with distant sounds. Owls, coyotes, cold wind in the branches. But inside the hollow tree, two hearts beat side by side. One fox, one bobcat. And the first step of a journey neither had expected, but both somehow needed, had begun. Dawn rose gray and cold over the Smoky Mountains. Frost clung to the fallen leaves like delicate lace, and from the hollow tree came the soft shuffle of paws. Alder blinked slowly, his breath misting in the air. His body ached, his stomach burned. But beside him, curled tight and still alive, was the little Bobcat Kitten. She stirred. Alder watched as she lifted her head, blinking at him with wary blue eyes. Her wound looked no better. Her leg was swollen and stiff. She tried to stand, failed, and let out a soft, frustrated growl. They had to move. The old trail in his memory whispered of a research cabin, Eliana's station, perhaps 30 miles north. Hills, rivers, predators, cold. It was a journey he hadn't taken in years, but it was the only road he knew. Alder licked the kitten's ear gently, then stepped out into the forest. The frost bit into his pads. The wind gnawed at his fur. He couldn't carry her far today, not on an empty belly. He needed food. Leaving her hidden beneath a blanket of pine needles, Alder vanished into the underbrush. His body was weak, but instinct sharpened him. Within the hour, he returned with 2 field mice and a soft feathered nestling. The kitten, startled at first, sniffed the offering suspiciously. Alder sat and watched as she devoured the larger mouse, then turned and limped closer to him. Not out of fear this time, but recognition. He'd never had a name for her before. But now, something about the waning sun and the way she fought to survive made him think of winter's edge, of light on the darkest day. Solstice. The journey continued. Through thickets of bramble that scratched Alder's flanks, across mossy gullies slick from last night's frost, through a field where hawks circled above. They moved in fragments. He carried her when she tired, and when she regained strength, she hobbled beside him, step by cautious step. The second night brought rain, cold, relentless, bone-soaking rain. Alder found a shallow rock cave near a trickling stream. Solstice collapsed inside without protest. He curled around her again, this time with no hesitation from either of them. Water ran down his face and back, and his jaw throbbed from hours of carrying her. His body said, "Stop." But something in him had changed. Solstice whimpered in her sleep. Alder gently licked her wounded leg. The swelling had not worsened, and the bleeding had stopped, but infection lurked like a silent hunter. On the third day, they reached an open meadow, wind-ripped and wide. Alder sniffed the air. Danger. Suddenly, a shadow swept over the grass, a white-tailed eagle, wings spread wide. It dove. Alder didn't think. He spun, grabbing Solstice by the scruff, and darted toward a tangle of thorn bushes. Talons sliced the air just behind them. They crashed into the thorns. Pain. Blood. A shriek from Solstice as thorns dug into her fur. But the eagle veered off, denied its prize. Alder shielded her with his body, every breath sharp with pain. Only when the sky cleared did he move again. Later that night, back in the safety of another hollow, Solstice did something unexpected. As Alder lay licking the scratches on his leg, she limped over, eyes steady, and licked one herself. Just once. Alder froze. The last time someone had cared for his wounds, it had been Eliana. And now, this kitten, this bobcat, this not quite prey, not quite family. He gently bumped his head against hers. Solstice let out a small, answering mew. They didn't need words. By the fourth evening, they reached the base of a low hill. Beyond it, Alder remembered, was a river. Fast, wide, and cold. He settled Solstice into a nest of ferns and pine, then curled around her. Their journey had already stretched further than instinct allowed. He had not eaten enough. She had barely walked a mile that day. The hardest part still lay ahead. But for now, beneath a silver sky, with stars beginning to blink between the clouds, they rested. Together. One fox, one bobcat. Two wanderers walking towards something neither fully understood, yet both quietly hoped for. The fourth morning brought a hush. No wind, no birdsong, only the gurgling promise of the river ahead. Alder rose slowly, his limbs stiff, his body crusted with old scratches and dried blood. Solstice still slept, curled against his flank, breathing in slow, shallow bursts. Her wounded leg looked better, less swollen, less angry. But it was clear now. She would carry the scar always. Alder stepped outside their nest of pine and peered down the slope. There it was, the little Arrow River, swift and wide, churning with snowmelt. A gray ribbon between this side of the forest and what lay beyond, the final stretch to Eliana's station. But it wasn't the current that concerned him. It was the log. An old tree, moss-covered and half-submerged, spanned the river like a fragile bridge. Slick, narrow, treacherous, and the only option. He returned to Solstice and nuzzled her awake. She blinked at him, groggy but alert, then turned toward the hill as if sensing the challenge ahead. He didn't carry her this time. She limped beside him. When they reached the edge, Alder tested the log with his paw. It wobbled slightly under his weight. He took a breath, then stepped forward, careful, deliberate, each paw fall measured. Halfway across, he paused and turned. Solstice stood at the edge, ears flattened, tail twitching. She took one tentative step onto the log, then another. The current below roared like a warning. Step, pause, step. The log trembled. Solstice slipped, but caught herself. She froze, eyes wide, claws scrabbling for purchase. Alder took one step back toward her, heart pounding. Solstice looked up. Something passed between them then, not instinct, not command. Trust. She pushed forward. Step by step, she crossed. When her paws touched solid ground again, Alder let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Solstice collapsed at his feet, panting. He licked her cheek gently, and she gave a soft growl in return. The river was behind them now, but as they climbed the final rise, a new scent drifted on the wind. Human, Eliana, and others, machines, metal, boots on dry leaves, voices, laughter, tools, oil, strange, unnatural things. Solstice stiffened, her body low to the ground. Alder's ears flattened. This was different from before. This wasn't just Eliana. There were many of them. He led her to a patch of dense brush, and they hunkered down, hidden. From there, they could see it, the research station. A wooden cabin with a wide porch, fences, and satellite dishes pointing skyward. Solar panels glinted in the sun. Humans moved about, some in uniform jackets, some with tablets, all speaking in bursts and gestures. But then, her. Eliana Moore. She stepped onto the porch, silver hair pulled into a braid, holding a steaming mug in one hand. She sat, cross-legged, surveying the treetops with a look Alder remembered. Solstice pressed against him, ears twitching. This was the moment. Alder hesitated. He couldn't approach with all those humans around. He didn't trust them. He barely trusted the world outside the forest. But Eliana, she had never hurt him. She had taught him that kindness and survival could coexist. The sun climbed higher. One by one, the researchers filtered into the woods, equipment slung over shoulders, voices fading into the distance. Only Eliana remained, still sipping her drink, still waiting, perhaps without knowing it. Alder nudged Solstice. She looked up at him, then at the cabin, then back again. He took the first step into the clearing. Solstice followed. They moved slowly, deliberately, until they reached a patch of grass about 50 yards from the porch, close enough to be seen, far enough to retreat. Alder set Solstice down gently, licked her face once. She nuzzled his neck, tail swishing uncertainly. He took 2 steps back toward the trees. She didn't follow. Instead, she turned and looked toward the porch, at the woman who had unknowingly brought 2 wild lives together. And then, "Solstice?" a voice called out, soft, unbelieving. Eliana had seen her. The world held its breath. "Solstice?" The voice was soft, disbelieving, trembling with something between wonder and fear. Eliana Moore rose from her seat, her mug forgotten on the porch rail. She stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a dream. The kitten didn't move. She stood where Alder had placed her, legs trembling, ears alert, but eyes locked on the human who spoke her name. Eliana took another step, then froze. A shape moved at the forest's edge. Alder. The fox stood still, half shadow, half light, his red coat glowing like fire against the green. His ears were forward, body poised, not to flee, but to understand. Recognition bloomed in Eliana's face. "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "It can't be." She knelt, lowering herself slowly, hands open and unthreatening. "You're the one. From the trap. The fox." Alder didn't run. The wind carried her scent. Familiar, unchanged. Pipe tobacco, rosemary from her garden, cedarwood from her cabin floor. These smells lived deep in his memory, as real as pain. He stayed. Eliana turned her gaze to Solstice, who now took a hesitant step toward her. Then another. Her gait was uneven, her legs stiff, but her eyes never left the woman's face. When Solstice finally reached her, Eliana stretched out a hand, slow and steady. The kitten sniffed it, then, gently, cautiously, rubbed her head against Eliana's palm. "Oh," Eliana breathed. "You're hurt." She cradled the kitten carefully, examining the healing gash. "How are you even alive?" Her fingers moved with practiced care, noting the cleaned wound, the weight the kitten had regained. "You've been cared for." Eliana looked up. Alder still stood there. It hit her. "You brought her back." The thought was so absurd, so impossible, she almost laughed. But the evidence lay in her arms, and the truth stood watching at the tree line. "You carried her, protected her. You brought her home." She set Solstice down gently and stood, taking a few steps toward Alder. He flinched. "It's okay," she said softly. "I won't come closer. I see you. I remember." From her coat pocket, she pulled a small piece of jerky and placed it on the ground halfway between them. Then she backed away. Solstice limped to Alder's side, rubbing her head against his leg with a soft purr. Alder looked down at her, then back at Eliana. For the first time, he stepped forward. 1 step, 2. He stopped at the jerky, sniffed it, then gently picked it up in his jaws and laid it at Solstice's feet. "A gift." Eliana smiled, tears rising. "I guess you're still full from the mice," she whispered. Alder sat down, tail curled around his paws, eyes steady. He didn't trust easily, but he trusted her. Solstice looked up at him, confused. Eliana spoke again. "You're not just a fox anymore, are you?" She knelt beside them, still giving space, but no longer fearing distance. "I wish I could tell you to stay," she murmured. "I know you won't live here, not in a cage, not like that. But maybe near us? There's a den at the edge of the woods, no traps, no roads. You'd be safe." Solstice mewed and nudged Alder's side. Alder didn't move. He was thinking. Behind him, the forest beckoned. Old trees, solitude, silence. A world that had always demanded he survive alone. But in front of him stood something new, a bond that had defied instinct, a kitten he had saved, a human who had once saved him. He turned, and did not leave. Eliana breathed out, shoulders softening. "We'll take care of her, I promise." She lifted Solstice again and began walking toward the porch. Halfway there, she paused. "I'll leave the den as it is," she called over her shoulder. "You decide." Inside the cabin, she prepared food, warm blankets, medicine. Outside, Alder stood alone in the grass, watching the door close. He looked down. A paw print beside his. Tiny. Fresh. Solstice had pressed herself into his life like a thorn that healed instead of wounded. The sky darkened. Alder turned toward the woods, but didn't go far. Just enough to disappear into the brush. Not gone, just nearby. Watching. Waiting. Something in him had changed. He wasn't running anymore. 1 year later, autumn returned to the Great Smoky Mountains, sweeping the forest in a blaze of gold and rust. The wind was cooler now, gentler somehow, as if the forest itself remembered. On the wooden porch of the research cabin, Eliana Moore sipped her morning coffee, wrapped in a thick gray sweater. Her eyes wandered, as they always did, to the trees beyond the clearing. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, and yet she always watched. At her feet, stretched comfortably on a woven rug, lay Solstice. No longer a fragile, wounded kitten, the bobcat had grown sleek and powerful, though she still limped faintly on her back leg. Her eyes were sharp, her movements precise. But her favorite place remained here, near Eliana, beside the warmth of her porch. Eliana leaned down and scratched gently behind Solstice's ear. The bobcat chirped in response, curling her tail around her paws. Then, a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods. Eliana straightened. From the shadows, a familiar silhouette emerged, lean, red-furred, proud. Alder. He stepped into the clearing like the season itself, quiet, dignified, unhurried. His coat glowed in the morning sun, brilliant as fire among fallen leaves, and he wasn't alone. Behind him waddled 3 fox kits, small, unsure, curious. They stuck close to their father's heels, eyes wide, noses twitching at every new scent. Eliana rose slowly, not wanting to disturb the moment. Solstice had already seen them. With a low, excited growl, she sprang from the porch and bounded toward the newcomers, tail flicking with joy. She reached Alder first, pressing her head gently against his shoulder. The fox did not flinch. He lowered his head and licked her cheek, once. Then the kits caught up. They skidded to a stop at the sight of the bobcat. One gave a startled yelp. Another crouched low in uncertainty. But Solstice crouched too, playfully, tail twitching, and reached out a gentle paw. They blinked. The third kit stepped forward, sniffing her cautiously. Solstice remained still, patient. Slowly, the kits crept closer. One nuzzled her flank. Another tried to paw at her tail. Solstice flicked it teasingly. Alder sat and watched, unbothered. On the porch, Eliana covered her mouth, her eyes wide and glassy. She had lived her life beside wild things, watched eagles nest, wolves return, fawns take their first steps. But this? A red fox returning with his family to a bobcat he once saved. It defied everything she knew. And yet, it felt inevitable. Alder looked at her. For a long moment, fox and woman regarded each other across the distance. No fear, no tension, just something quiet, ancient, recognition. She stepped down from the porch and knelt. "I was hoping," she said softly, "you'd bring them." Alder blinked slowly. He turned to the kits, who were now chasing Solstice in circles around a stump. She let them win, let them pounce on her tail, roll across the grass. She was all teeth and grace, but gentle. So very gentle. When they tired, they collapsed beside her in a heap of fur and laughter. Alder padded over to Eliana, stopping a few feet away. Not close enough to touch, but closer than ever before. "You found home, didn't you?" she whispered. "And you came back." A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the mingled scents of pine, tobacco, fox, and cat. A new scent now, a shared one, the scent of family. Eliana pointed toward the rock den near the forest edge. "It's still there," she said. "Safe, dry, yours." Alder didn't look. He didn't need to. He already knew the way. Instead, he sat down in the grass, tail sweeping gently behind him. Solstice trotted over, the kits trailing her like shadows. She nudged Alder's shoulder and flopped down beside him. One of the kits curled up against her side. Eliana laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "I should be writing this down," she murmured. "But who would believe me?" She walked back to the porch, gave them space. As she sat down again, she looked out over the clearing, a clearing no longer empty. Alder lay beside Solstice. The kits dozed between them. The sun crept higher, golden and warm. And in that stillness, in that impossible harmony, the forest held its breath. Because for one red fox, one wild bobcat, and 3 tiny lives born from instinct but shaped by mercy, this was home.